Good afternoon. Hey, Facebook. It is day 6 of the Facebook Live Challenge. And first of all, I wanted to say my thoughts and prayers are with everyone. I have so many clients and so many friends that are in the general vicinity of the wildfires in California, and I just wanted to say that you will constantly be on my in my thoughts and on my prayer list as these things rage out of control. I think I saw this morning 5% contained, and the Santa Ana winds hitting about 70 miles an hour, and there's just a lot to request your safety from. So please stay safe and don't take any chances if you're out there. Where am I today? Welcome to, I'm on the bridge between the No Name Key and Big Pine Key. Now, whoever thinks to name something No Name Key is kind of crazy. I guess they ran out of creative names. And so I am sitting here on the bridge, and behind me is what used to be a thriving mangrove, and you can see that everything is stripped and dry. Everything is so, after the hurricane came through and all those winds came through, it took all the leaves off and it killed all these mangroves. Normally mangroves are, they live in salt water, they survive with salt water, and they are, man, they're in for a little of a rebuild. And a lot of birds nest, and a lot of birds will use these as their nesting grounds. So we've got some recovery to do. I'm going to walk up to the middle of the thing as I talk. But one of the things I wanted to, I've had a couple of conversations. Every week goes by where I'm talking to podcast clients and people that are, maybe they're just doing some consulting with me about their podcast and that sort of thing. And we're talking about a lot of different things that don't affect just them, but they affect a lot of other podcasters. And so one of the things that I was talking to a few people about this week is how we as podcasters, and I hate to say it, but especially sometimes as women in podcasting, we start our show and we think that we are going to brand our show, and we get all hung up on our logo, we get all hung up on our branding, and we want to talk about branding this, branding that, branding the other thing. And in actuality, the sooner we can realize as a podcaster that you are your brand, and maybe you don't intend it to be that way. Maybe you don't start out and say, well, I'm going to be my brand, and I'm going to need some big brand, or I need to brand myself. Ultimately, you are your brand for your podcast. And so it's one of those, it's sort of a, I don't want to say a watershed moment, but for most podcasters, it is a watershed moment, because the sooner you go ahead and embrace that, the sooner you will become comfortable in that role. I was talking to a podcaster yesterday who has just kind of is coming into that conclusion, and they don't want it to feel icky, and they don't want it to feel markety, and they don't, that's just not their thing, to be all icky and markety and just putting themselves out there as their brand. But at the same time, it's sort of a necessary evil for that to happen. And so when you embrace yourself as your brand, it doesn't mean you turn into the world's best online marketer. It doesn't mean you do anything other than just identify yourself with your podcast. And hi, my name is Christy, and I'm the host of the Podcast Rescue Podcast. I also am the founder of Team Podcast. And so that's kind of how I have to brand myself. It took me a long time to come into realization that I was my own brand. I thought when I first started my show, I thought that I was going to be able to kind of sit in my basement and do my show in a vacuum, put it out there, and I'd have this great show, and everyone would love my show. If I could just make it on New and Noteworthy, everybody'd love my show, and then I could just have the show be the brand. But the bottom line is, I realized quickly that it didn't work that way, and I have to be the brand for the show, and you have to be the brand for your show too. I don't know why it's hard for us to embrace that, and I think especially as we, as podcasters, especially when we start with a cause, and we start because we want to do good in the world, and we want to put a good message out there, boy, it's hard sometimes to then turn it around and think about that being a brand, but it is, and it makes a big difference in how you view yourself and how you view your podcast if you go ahead and embrace that, because you realize that you're doing things for your show that nobody else could do. So for example, like a lot of people don't sell podcasts. Like if you build an audience and you build a brand with your podcast, very rarely can someone else just come in and do exactly what you are doing, because either it's you, the host, or you and your perspective or your personality or something like that that causes people to be drawn to that show. So the sooner you can embrace your brand, the sooner you can kind of fully walk into that role and step into that role and own that space and own that platform that you're building, because you're not just building a brand, you're actually building a platform. And that platform can be used in any way that you want it to be used. And most of the time with podcasters, it's for good. It's absolutely putting good out in the world for a cause, a niche, or some other reason that people want to start a podcast to help do some kind of good in the world. And I love that so many podcasters are doing that. Just wanted to give you a peek at the channel. You can see this channel is it's pretty wide. Right here, this side over here is No Name Key. And then when we go over here, you can see this is the Gulf side of Big Pine Key. You can see all the blue tarps on the roofs. My roof has a blue tarp on it right now as well. We're all waiting for contractors. We're waiting for insurance money. We're waiting for help to rebuild. And so a lot of us are in the blue tarp situation. It's a pretty shallow channel. A lot of the water in the Keys is very shallow right now. But there used to be a few houseboats moored out here before the storm hit. And so even since the storm has hit, I can see sandbars out here that did not used to be here. So Irma really churned up a lot of sand and made this shallow, like that sailboat that's out there. It's actually beached on a little sandbar, but it was didn't used to be that way. It used to be floating. So a lot of the things have changed as far as the topography of our ocean, and you can see even way out in the distance. Those are mangrove islands that used to be where a lot of birds and the seabirds and great white herons and blue herons and all of those things would nest, and they're just nothing but dry brush. And so hopefully at some point in time they will regrow and we'll have some new growth here. But anyway, just wanted to say, be your brand. Doesn't diminish your podcast at all, doesn't diminish what you want to do in the world, but your brand is you. You are it. And so I definitely think that the sooner you embrace that, especially as women, guys, some guys have issues with it too, especially if they're very sensitive to like the salesiness of it. So go ahead and embrace your brand. Don't be afraid to brand yourself. And that doesn't mean, I don't know, I'm not one of those big headshot people that put a different headshot of me on my website. Every time you turn around, you're not going to see my face there. But branding and putting who you are and what you're about out there into the world is part of that. And that means your website, that means on your podcast page. All of those things need to include you, because that's what the listeners are going to fall in love with. So, all right. If you have questions about your podcast, or I can help you in any way, I have these conversations all the time with podcasters that are at different stages in their journey. So you can check out my podcast on iTunes. It's called Podcast Rescue. I'm having a little problems fighting with iTunes about the search for Podcast Rescue. It's not coming up. I think maybe podcast is a word they have kind of removed from search because everyone wants to put the word podcast in their title, and so they're not searching on podcast. And so it's a few things I've got to do with iTunes to get it right and fight with them to get it taken care of. So anyway, day 6 in the can. Got 1 week coming up tomorrow. Excited about tomorrow because I got something interesting to talk to you about tomorrow. We're going to talk about, are you being where you can be found? So, thanks for coming by. Thanks for stopping by. You're at No Name Key today. What's left of it. And good to see you. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye.